Hi, everybody. I'm going to tell you a story, actually. A story about a watch. It's a long story, which starts in 1979. 1979, I was 15 years old. So do your maths, and then you see when I was born. 15 years old, I was confirmed. I'm Italian. I was raised as an Italian Catholic. Confirmation, it's like your second baptism. You know, when you're baptized, you're a baby. You don't know who your godparents are. In fact, you don't know what's going on at all. Confirmation is like an adult version of that. 15 years old, you get some influence in who your godfather is. And the godfather I chose was like 10 years older than me. He was old enough to be experienced and give me advice, but he was also close enough to me in age to identify with me. And yes, Italians do have godfathers. We really do have them. So he bought me a gift. You know, this is a very, very important occasion, confirmation. And he bought me a gift. He bought me a watch, lovely watch. It was a digital watch. Now, we're talking 1979, so digital watches in 1979, they didn't look like digital watches today. It was one of those Casio, Seiko, LCD. Some of you might remember it. I'd love to be able to show you that watch, actually, but the trouble is, I lost it. That was an expensive, cool science fiction watch. And I lost it. I felt so bad about this. I felt so bad I couldn't even tell my godfather I'd lost it. Every time he saw me, he'd say, "Where's the watch?" And I'd say, you know, it's being cleaned, or I forgot it, or I didn't want to scratch it. And in fact, to this day, he doesn't know I lost it. So if he ever sees this talk, Franco, I'm really sorry, man. But I felt so bad about that watch that I vowed that I could never buy a watch again, because I never wanted that feeling again of losing something so valuable that somebody else had given to me that was so symbolic. So I didn't think about watches again. Let's fast forward to 1982. I turned 18 in 1982. 18 is an important age too, right? And my father, my Italian father, Vincenzo, he bought me a present, a gift, to symbolize me entering manhood. And what he bought me was, of course, no, he's Italian. He bought me a gun, okay? Watches are useless. He bought me a gun. Actually, what he bought me was one of those shotguns, you know, the... Wait with me, I can see some people are a bit shocked here. I've got to explain. You see, in Italy, in the south of Italy, the symbol of manhood in a house is a shotgun hanging on the wall in the house. And as a kid, we would go on holiday to Italy, and you know, all my uncles, they had shotguns in the house. They're hunters. They hunt for game. They're out in the forests. They're hunters. Everyone has a gun. This is before the days of health and safety where you have to lock them in the cupboards. A gun was on the wall. That's manhood. So my father bought me a gun. No bullets. Now, I went to a really nice school from the ages of 11 to 18. It was a really posh school with kids from wealthy families. Now, I wasn't wealthy. In fact, my parents were very, very poor, but I took an exam when I was 11, and I did quite well in this kind of entrance exam, and the school offered me a kind of scholarship, you know, this kind of low-income parents where the kids get an opportunity to go to a nice school, which is great, right? I'm on the good path now, except that I'm surrounded by rich kids all the time, and you know, it wasn't, they'd have everything. I had nothing. My father's poor. That gun that he bought me, though, he spent $500 on that, or the equivalent of $500. It was a lot of money for him. The gun was actually used as well. It was secondhand. Now, when I went to this school, there was a kid at the school who had his birthday on the same day as me. His name was Ulrich. He had a Swiss father and an English mother. And his father was an international banker. I mean, they were loaded. Ulrich was loaded. He was so loaded, we called him Ulrich. And you know what? You can see what it was like. Every birthday he would show off some fancy present, yeah? What did I have to show? Nothing. And this year was no exception. He came into school on his 18th birthday, and what do you think his rich Swiss father bought him for his birthday? A watch. A Rolex watch, $5,000. It was insane, yeah? $5,000 watch, and I had a $500 gun. And he was there, you know, showing off his watch, and everybody, "Whoa, yeah, that's really cool, Ulrich." And I was standing there, and Ulrich looked at me like he would do every year, and he'd say, "So, Pellegrino, what did you get for your birthday?" I said, "Funny you should mention." And I went into my bag and pulled out this. And the kids were all over it. They were like, "Wow, this is great, cool. Is it real?" "Of course it's real." "Have you got any bullets?" "No, I haven't got any bullets. It's just symbolic." They loved it. And Ulrich, for the first time in his life, was jealous. And I could see that jealousy in his eye. Now, I've always had a really good nose for business. So I said to Ulrich, "Do you want to swap?" Ulrich looked at me and said, "What? Do you want to swap? Your watch for my gun?" He said, "Yes." We swapped. Because, of course, he's never going to get one of those, is he? He's got all the money in the world, but his father's never buying him a gun. We swapped. What a great deal. 5,000 watch, $500. That's a great deal, isn't it? I couldn't wait to get home and tell my father, "This is a great deal. We could buy another gun with it and still have 4,500 left over. This is economic genius." I took it home to show my father, proud. "Look, Papa, look what I did." My father's reaction, "You don't understand anything." "What, Papa? I've made a great deal. This is a $5,000 watch, and I've exchanged it for a $500 gun." He said, "Pellegrino, I'm going to teach you 2 lessons now. Lesson number 1, never follow the money. Money will never make you happy. It will make you comfortable, but it will never make you happy. Remember that. But lesson number 2 is even more important." He said to me, "Pellegrino, Pellegrino, Pellegrino. You know what your name Pellegrino means? It means pilgrim, somebody who will travel very much. I think you will travel very much in your life." He was right about that. I travel all over the world. I've been doing it for 20, 30 years. And then he said to me, "You are not an ugly person." "Oh, thank you, Papa." It's okay. You take after me, you know. "You are not ugly. I think you will marry one day a beautiful woman." He was right about that too. That's how I came to Norway. And he said, "Let's imagine you are going on one of your fancy business trips to China, Singapore, Brazil, I don't know where you are going. You decide to come home one day early to surprise your wife. You come in the door, you hear something upstairs, you go upstairs, you go in the bedroom, and you find your wife in bed with another man. What are you going to do? Pull out your watch and ask him how time he finished?" Take the watch back, get the gun. Now, I tell that story to my kids. My kids love that story. They love it. "Oh, tell us the story about the gun and the watch." They love that story. They love that story. And I should mention that my kids, they're Norwegian. My wife's Norwegian. My kids, they're really sweet. They're typical Norwegian kids. They've got the blonde hair and the blue eyes. They look so Norwegian. They look so Norwegian, in fact, that when my father first saw them, he looked at me and he said, "Pellegrino, I think you travel too much." Eh? But the point is, yeah, that's something else. But ever since then, I've never had a watch, right? I don't wear a watch. But I've secretly yearned for a watch. I have. They're lovely things, right? I've always wanted a watch. And you know, every year we would kind of say, "What are you having for your birthday? And what would you like for Christmas?" And I always wanted a watch, and my father said, "You don't need a bloody watch. You don't need a watch." "What do you mean I don't need a watch?" "You don't need a bloody watch. You know why? Because you can tell the time anyway." "Come on, what are you talking about?" I said, "Haven't I told you the story about the man who came to the village and he was going to work, on his way to work, and he saw another man sitting down in the grass next to his donkey, and the man stopped and said, 'What is the time?' And the man in the donkey, he lifted up the testicles, the balls of the donkey, and he said, 10 past 10. "Huh? What are you talking about?" And the man said, "Are you sure it's 10 past 10? "Hang on a minute. Actually, it's 12 minutes past 10. And the man went to work, and he said, and then on his way home from work, he stopped again in the evening, the same man sitting in the grass with his donkey. He said, "What is the time now?" And the man lifted the balls of the donkey and he said, it's 7:27. And the man said, how do you know exactly what time it is? And the man said, because when I lift the donkey's balls, I can see the clock tower in the village. So, you know, that's how. There will always be somewhere to tell the time. Yeah. Fast forward, 2013. I'm about to turn 50. I really want to watch. 50, big year, celebration. I want to watch. Still haven't got to watch. We were at a wedding, actually. All the family were there, enjoying this lovely wedding. And we were sort of, after the wedding, we're at reception and we're talking. And I remember we sort of talking at this bar. It was sort of over here. And we were at the bar looking at the TV. And there was a horrible event on the TV. It's another one of those horrible sort of terrorist attacks, basically. And this was drawing us in. It was horrible. There were families and kids. And it was just horrible. And we were looking at this, and we didn't switch it off. And someone said to me, weren't you there just now, Pellegrino? I said, well, yeah, I was there a month ago, actually. And God, we were sort of thinking about the fragility of life and how things can change. And, I was there a month ago, and my dad turned to me and he said a really strange thing. He looked at me and he said, I think you travel too much. But this time it wasn't funny. And we're just looking at this, a horrible event, and the contrast of the wedding and the TV, and then he did a really, really, really strange thing, actually. He kind of was sort of sitting there with my hand in my pocket, and he put his hand on my hand, my father, which he doesn't do very often, actually. He's not a very tactile person. He just took my hand here. He looked at me and he said, go and buy the watch. I said, what? Go and buy the watch. Now is the time to buy the watch. That's what I did. I bought the watch. This is the watch that I went to buy. And this watch is a symbol for me. It doesn't just tell the time, it reminds me of things. It reminds me of important things in life. What it reminds me of is that life changes and values change as well. Now, you know the thing about stories, what they do? I once read that stories separate human beings from apes. How do they do that? Because apes, they communicate with each other, they do it quite well, but they haven't got the capacity to imagine things, to contextualize things, abstract things like religion and money and ambition. They can't do that. We can do that. And the way we do it is to tell stories. That's what makes us human. And did you like these stories, by the way? They're lovely stories, aren't they? Do you know what's happening when I tell these stories to you? Two things are happening in your brain. Dopamine is being released. Dopamine, the novelty drug. When you hear something new, dopamine is released. And dopamine helps us learn. That's why I use humor in my courses and my workshops. It helps people remember. The other thing that's going on is oxytocin. I call it the empathy drug. It's also known as the cuddle drug. Yeah, that's the hormone that binds people together. And all you Norwegians in the room, we all remember 22nd of July, right? Do you remember the days afterwards when we were all huddled together? I've never seen Norwegians so together in my life. That was the day I became Norwegian like you guys. Oxytocin. So you would think that corporations and companies would use storytelling to teach their people about the values of the company, wouldn't you? But in 2012, the United States alone spent $720 million on employee engagement programs. That's a lot of money. And it's projected to go up to $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion. But when they get the results back, they discover that as little as 13% of those employees are actually engaged. That is not what I call a good return on investment. So what I see on a daily basis in corporations, I see leaders, managers, people giving us graphs and budgets and strategies and all this stuff, which is important, I know it is. All the data that we hear. And then wondering why people don't get engaged and don't get enthusiastic about life. They should be storytelling. They should be getting around the canteen tables and telling each other stories. You should be doing it with your kids, you should be doing it with each other, and corporations should be doing it in their companies. They say that the age of the robots is coming. And you know, robots are going to take over human beings. Well, I reckon that half the human beings in the corporations I see have become robots right now already, you know? Data is important, you know, the fact stuff, but also the emotional aspect. They say that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Have you heard that? It's also through his head, through his brain. So my message to you really is this. Tell stories. Tell your kids stories. Tell each other stories. If we're not careful, we'll lose the ability to do this, you know. And I want to quote one of the greatest, one of my favorite TED speeches I've ever seen. You've probably seen it too. Brene Brown's speech in Houston in 2010. She talked about stories, and she used the definition that stories are data with soul. Isn't that a lovely expression? So I hope you take that with you. I'm looking at my watch now, and I know that my time's run out. Tell each other stories. Thank you very much.